In my opinion, Malzahar is one of the easiest and best champions to learn for new League of Legends players. Now you're probably thinking, Pippin, what the hell? You come back from like a 4-month hiatus and tell me that out of the blue? I'm gonna say yeah, 100%. I've been playing a lot of Malzahar lately, whenever I'm playing normal games, which admittedly isn't too frequently. But I've been playing him because frankly I haven't had much success with Lux lately. And I think that's a me issue. That's just being out of practice and being really bad with skill shots. But that's kind of normal now that I think about it. So I decided, let's learn a new mage. And I decided on Malzahar because I kind of liked his damage over time idea. And as I played more and more games, I started to realize these are some vital mechanics. Simple mechanics, sure, but vital mechanics that I'm using. Things I didn't even consider on Lux or on, any of the other champions I played, which is like... Alright, it's kind of bad that I can't think of any. Oh dear. But Malzahar definitely has a different playstyle. He has a bit more safe of a playstyle. But he has very interesting mechanics that you can use. And for beginning players, they're vital things to learn. So let's talk. Why do I think Malzahar is a good champion for beginning players? Well, one of the first things I want to bring up is the fact that he has no mobility. He does not have any kind of dash, aside from flash if you take it. So positioning and knowing where to move and how to move is really, really essential on him. And I think that's a good thing, to learn a champion with no mobility first. It's harder to pick up a high mobility champion because obviously they have higher skill caps. League is more of a reaction game now. And, Zed, Yasuo, Pike, Qiyana, I think that's how you say her name, Qiyana in particular, they're very reactive. It's not a lot of, I don't want to say it's not a lot of thought process, because it clearly is. It's League of Legends. But you have all of these champions with a ton of mobility and a ton of mechanics in their kit. And yeah, it might be a good thing to learn that initially. But the problem is, either A, it's way too complex of a champion to learn for a first-time player, or B, you do get accustomed to that champion, but then you get kind of complacent. You think too much about, oh, I can take this fight because I have the mobility to get out. I can walk through this part of the jungle because I know I can use these particular skills to get out should I be in danger. Malzahar doesn't have a whole lot of that. We'll get into that a little bit later, but in terms of mobility, he definitely does not have the advantage. So, this may seem bad, but for a new player, learning positioning is crucial. And a lot of people do like to pick up mid lane, mages, marksmen, and Malzahar's a prime example of no mobility, so you have to know your positioning. If you don't, you're going to get caught out and die pretty much instantly. So learning a champion that doesn't have mobility first actually makes learning champions with mobility easier. Because then not only do you have the tools to get out should the need arise, but you have the proper positioning so that if you don't have to get out, if you're positioned well, you can use those skills to go in. So proper positioning is one of the things I absolutely love about Malzahar. Now, is he completely vulnerable? No, and that brings up the second point. He has a very nice, healthy margin of error. His passive, his shield, 90% damage reduction, crowd control immunity. Now, you could argue that this makes you too safe, and to an extent. However, early game, it has an extremely long cooldown. So if you get hit once, that's your get out of jail free card. That's your, oh crap, I messed up. I better not do that again. So it simultaneously lets you learn the positioning, learn how to move about, but also gives you that one extra chance should you make that one mistake. It also teaches you safe play because you want to keep that shield up for engages, jungle ganks, etc. You don't want a basic attack to pop that shield. You don't want a stray spell to block that shield. So that further enhances that learning positioning insight. But even aside from those things, his kit is simple. It is pretty direct on how things work. He has a simple burst spell with a silence, voidlings, malefic visions for damage over time, and his ultimate. Definitely not the most mechanical of mid laners. He 100% is not. But his kit does everything you need. And it is a very easy kit to learn, but it's also a kit that lets you do a lot of things. That aforementioned safety I talked about. You can learn mechanics through the silence, knowing to stop channeled ults, knowing to hit an entire group with a group-wide team fight silence. It teaches you that kind of spell positioning, and lets you have some outplay potential. I know there's not a lot of outplay potential in, casting a simple spell and waiting for the damage, but when you use the silence properly to stop vital ults or to stop channeled abilities, you learn, again, proper ability usage, knowing when to use it, and it gives you that level of safety. A silenced enemy can't do much other than auto attack, which, when you're facing mages, that could be a nice reprieve. Now his voidlings, what makes these so good? Again, it's a buffer that isn't true safety. Proper use of voidlings can block skill shots. They can do damage for you while you're kiting around, meaning you can focus entirely on kiting instead of, trying to fight and kite. That's way more difficult than it seems. But it lets you focus on one thing while simultaneously doing another. Both Malefic Visions and Summon Voidlings let you do this. You can be contributing to a fight while kiting around, dodging spells, making sure your shield is up, or using the shield to save somebody, etc. So the Voidlings are a nice buffer, but they won't save you from gross mispositioning. Getting caught out by 3 people in the jungle, a couple of measly Voidlings aren't going to save you there. But when used properly to block skill shots or deal damage for you while you're kiting around, that's super important. And that's a good barrier for, trying to learn how to position. It gives you, again, a little extra layer of protection that isn't raw or free mobility. Now his ultimate, that's the big one. Having a suppression isn't, yet again, another layer of safety. It stops tower dives, it stops channeled abilities, it stops an AD carry from contributing to a fight, it stops a tank from getting off that crucial ultimate. It holds people down while you consider your options. Again, Malzahar's more, I'm not going to say strategic, but if you're trying to figure out how to play out a fight in a 1v1, using that ultimate gives you that 2.5 seconds to go, okay, I might flash over here. I might cast my silence here, predicting his flash. It lets you think these through at a slower pace. Then as you get better and better, you can transition to those champions that have those high mobility spells, that have those complex mechanics, because then you'll have the thought process. And with practice, you can do it way faster than just 2.5 seconds in an ult. So Malzahar has a lot of safety going for him when you play him right, and that's the most important thing. It is very easy to play wrong, and still, and I'll be kind of biased here, land a 5-man Qiyana ult, or land a Yasuo ult, or something like that. I'm not calling these champions simple, just as a disclaimer, because they definitely aren't, otherwise I'd be playing them all freaking day. But there's an extremely high skill ceiling to them. So learning them can be difficult, or when you do learn them too quickly, you may not have the right positioning, or etc. So Malzahar teaches that. He lets you do damage while you focus on something else. He has layers of protection going for him that let you survive a single mistake or outplay an ultimate, a skill shot, etc. So there are mechanics there to learn, but a lot of them are mental as opposed to mashing buttons on a keyboard. So what else? This isn't the best game to show it, at least not the early game, but Malzahar is pretty safe in terms of farming. Malefic Vision spreads to other minions when the target affected dies. On top of that, Malzahar gets mana restoration. So, if played right, Malefic Visions not only lets you farm properly, but also helps you keep your sustain in your lane. And these are good things to have when you're first learning, because you don't want to get forced out at level 1 and spend the next 20 minutes really regretting life. That sucks. Malzahar may not have the health restoration, but he has the tools needed to survive when played properly, when played safe. Now in the early game, how effective is this farming? Can be difficult. But as you get later and later into the game, level up Malefic Visions, level up your Voidlings, let those do the work, you'll find your CS count just starting to rack up. This helps you stay relevant. I've had a lot of bad early games as Malzahar, and I usually have bad early games. That's just kind of me. But due to how effectively he can stay in a lane in CS, it doesn't hurt as much as with other champions. So it lets you keep up, it lets you stay relevant, and it lets you have at least a slightly more decent game than spending 20 minutes 3 levels down and 2 items down. That's not fun at all. That's just going to encourage people to quit, especially when their teammates are raging at you. Malzahar doesn't quite have that problem. Yeah, there have been times I've fed my ass off in lane, but it becomes much easier to come back when you have as reliable of CS that Malzahar does. So, a lot of this boils down to mental games and knowing how to properly use Malzahar's kit, which, thank God, it's a pretty simple kit. So, you have the ability to focus on other things. It's really hard to learn how to kite when you're playing a mechanically intensive champion, because not only do you have to focus on kiting, you have to focus on your own champion's mechanics, all the skills available to you, etc., etc. I can't count how many times I've been playing Vayne, and I will forget for like 5 seconds that Tumble is a skill. It's on a really short cooldown. Should probably be using that. Malzahar doesn't quite have that issue. His cooldowns are long in the early game, sure, but they actually shorten quite nicely. And he can contribute a lot to a team even when he's behind. A silence and a suppression are no joke, especially to champions that haven't properly countered them with QSS. And that kind of brings me to my next point. Yeah, a lot of Malzahar's kit is absolutely screwed by Quicksilver Sash. And I totally understand why, because suppression is such a massive ability, effect. You can lock up so many people, and, well, okay, not so many people, but one person. But you can stop high mobility champions, you can stop tanks, you can stop AD carries. There's a lot that the spell can do. And it's only fair that an item should be able to get rid of that. That doesn't mean Malzahar's useless, though. The third thing this kind of teaches is baiting out item usages. Things like Gunblade or Redemption, things like that. A lot of items don't have a lot of outplay potential, which is fair, because you can't really bait out a Redemption. I guess you could, but baiting out items usually isn't too common, except for one, and that's Quicksilver Sash. Getting rid of all crowd control is huge. So if you learn how to pop that before going in for that big ultimate, guess what? If you learn it here, you'll be able to learn it on other champions as well. Now, yes, you could learn on other champions. This is a skill you could honestly learn in general, but I don't think it's as big of an effect on any other champion than Malzahar. Because QSS screws his kit, so learning to play around it is vital. And then when you get to other champions that aren't as reliant on baiting that QSS, but might still like to, it becomes way easier of a job when you have more tools, more mobility, more mechanics to work with. Use those to bait out that QSS faster, or know how to, and then sky's the limit. So he has a lot going for him. He excels in team fights with area-wide silences, locking up that vital member, voidlings, and just in general being able to output damage without really being near the fight. Obviously he has to be closer than, say, a Xerath or a Ziggs, but he doesn't have to directly be in there. Once you pop Malefic Visions, maybe pop your ult, maybe cast a couple Qs, you can focus on your kiting, your movement, your positioning. All while Malefic Visions is ticking down, or you are suppressing a vital target, something along those lines. It's always been my belief that once you practice a mechanic multiple times, the speed can come later. I teach this in fencing, I teach this in English. Forcing speed into something, trying to learn something really fast, or seeing something really cool and trying to do it at speed, that's rough. Because once you force speed into something, or try to force something, all the technique is lost. But if you build up that technique, slowly, carefully, deliberately, the speed comes naturally. And when I'm playing Malzahar, at first it was a little rough, because, I'd forget to use spells, or not know my cooldowns, things like that. But weirdly enough, playing Malzahar actually made me a bit better of a League player in terms of my reflexes. Because now that I could focus a little less on what my kit was doing, and a lot more on how people were moving around, how the fight was going, when I started playing other champions, I still did that. But then it became a bit easier to focus on because I knew what to look for. Then I could start focusing on the kit, the mechanics, the champion, while still keeping my knowledge of the map, my movements, my positioning. This is why I love the safety Malzahar has. It's not just mobility. It's not just a get-out-of-jail-free card. It's little things that let you save yourself from one mistake, maybe two. But egregious positioning, terrible positioning, is still going to be punished as hard as any other champion. Kind of like here. I knew Sejoy would chase a little too far, locked her up. Simple as that. This game should kick off right now. I know that early game was a little slow, but once you start snowballing a lead, whether it's through creep score, kills, jungle assist, ganks, whatever, you're going to find you deal a lot of damage. Malzahar is just big on damage. And he has both kinds that a mage wants. He's got burst damage, and he's got damage over time. You would be surprised at how much Call of the Void can do to a champion that isn't building magic resist. If the silence wasn't enough, the damage sure gets up there, especially if you've been farming correctly. So having that burst alongside damage over time through Malefic Visions is really nice and versatile. He also has a very straightforward build path. My favorite's the Rylai's Leandry's build, because why not add more damage over time, right? There's just a lot you can do with him. for having such a simple kit. And yeah, Malzahar's one of those old school champs. He's changed. There was that rework that gave him the Voidling ability and removed the, I forget what it was called, Nether Portal, something like that. But that was about it. So he still has a very straightforward kit, much unlike, recent releases. But all of that safety, that non-mobility based safety, gives him a very good window of opportunity to learn mechanics. You can learn team fights, you can learn split push. Malzahar's a phenomenal split pusher because you often need 2 people to stop him. Because if you only send 1 and they don't have QSS, you're just going to lock him down and kill him usually. I think I do that to Sejuani a little bit later. I don't remember. But being able to learn when to team fight, when to split push, when to flash in on an AD carry is vital. It forces you to check item builds, looking for that QSS, looking for magic resist. It forces you to pay attention to the map, because if you don't, well, you're going to get caught out and die, safety be damned. So all these tiny little things that Malzahar can do teaches you how to properly play for other champions. I've seen so many badly positioned Katarinas trying to play in mid lane. And you'll know when you come up against a bad Katarina, because where they shunpo to, where they teleport to, becomes super easy to predict. And then you just start aiming your spells there, get free damage. But Katarinas that know their mechanics, oh god, they're terrifying. But it's not just ability mechanics, it's map positioning. Being able to tell on the fly where those daggers land. Being able to know where to go, who to damage, etc. You can learn all of those things at a much slower pace with Malzahar. Who do I put Malefic Visions onto? Frontline tank and let Leandries burn them down? Or should I flash in for that AD carry, kill them with it, and let it spread? Who do I ult? The tank that's about to initiate? The backline that's about to deal a mondo load of damage? Who has QSS? Who's the biggest threat on the team? These are all questions that League of Legends players need to ask themselves. Because you can't just rely on champion mechanics to get you through a game. You have to know how the enemy moves, how you position, how you react. And having those hypermobile get-out-of-jail-free cards does not teach you this, because it just teaches, if I'm in a bad situation, I can get out. And that's not bad, but it's way better to learn how to position properly, to know how to move in a fight. Mages especially. Immobile mages, Brand, Ziggs, Xerath, Lux. If you position badly there, you're screwed. So you can do that with Malzahar, have those safety nets, and then once you learn how to, keep those safety nets safe, then you can switch over to Lux, Brand, Xerath, and know that kind of positioning that you need. Now, does this help you with learning tanks, top laners? Nah. Those are a whole different ballgame in terms of mechanics. Tanks are never going to play in the back line. But some things are universal. That positioning I mentioned. You can still use that kind of positioning on the tank. But instead of positioning to avoid enemies, you might position so that, oh, I need to tank the skill shot. I need to catch this ultimate. Malzahar also kind of teaches initiation, now that I think about it, with his ultimate. Locking up a target for 2.5 seconds, that's huge. So if somebody's out of position, and you can initiate on them, that's going to give your team ample time in a 4v5. So yeah, that actually does teach initiation, doesn't it? Nice. All's the better. In my opinion, mages like Brand, Malzahar, Lux, they are still some of my favorite champions to play. Mostly because of this precise reason. I can use my skills, sure, but I don't have to be a mechanical god to play them. A lot more of the outplays come from that positioning, come from that map knowledge, come from reading your opponent and knowing what they're going to do. And frankly, I'm old and washed up. I cannot pay attention to like 3 things at once. I suck at it. I've just never had those kind of reflexes. Well, okay, I did back in the day, but yeah. Late 20s does terrible things to ya. Could you learn a champion like Brand or Lux immediately? Oh god, yeah. But sometimes control mages, especially in an era of hypermobility, can be feast or famine. You don't have the mobility to play safe, you don't, if you're behind, you won't have the damage to be a threat. It can be rough. I've had a lot of games on Lux where I go ham, go to town, rip on some fools. And I've had games where I've been absolutely demolished. And I spend the rest of the 20 minutes in the game useless. And that's not a good feeling at all. Malzahar's the closest I've gotten to a champion that I feel comfortable with, that can stay relevant no matter how the lane goes. Now obviously this game, it's going really freaking well. 9 and 8. 9-0 and 8, I should say. That's good. But even in games where I've gone, 3 deaths in lane, 4 deaths in lane, thanks to his CSing, thanks to his split pushing, thanks to his great mana conservation when played right, you can still contribute. Even if that CSing doesn't go well, even if it's like super hyper freaking aggressive, you can still have that suppression, the silence, the extra targets in the form of the voidlings, the malefic vision's damage over time. Thankfully, Leandri's Torment doesn't really scale with your level. It's just going to scale with, oh, let's burn some targets down. So even with just that item, you can contribute to burning down tanks a bit, burning down marksmen a bit. Is it perfect? Oh god, no. But I found it's a heck of a lot better than having like a Lux combo take off only 10% of someone's health. Or, that strong as hell 80 carry just life stealing through all of that burst you might have tried to do. So I encourage you all to at least try Malzahar. I ain't gonna lie, he's sometimes kind of boring to play. But he's also very satisfying to play in ways, solely because of that damage over time. It's so fun watching all those numbers tick down. It's partly why I picked him up. But by learning mechanics through a champion that has a very straightforward kit, with safety tools that don't promote unhealthy positioning, Malzahar is the perfect mage for people that want to learn. Because when he does well, he does extremely well. But when he doesn't do well, he still has the tools to get back into the game, to contribute to fights, and show you how to come back from a bad early game, to press an advantage, to look for items, to pay attention to what champions are doing what the map is doing, how you're positioning. All of these things are vital. And Malzahar is the perfect way to learn them. I should do a champion introduction on this. That's the video. Thanks, guys. We'll hopefully see you soon. I want to get back into video making a bit, so we'll hopefully see you then. Take care, y'all.